Hey folks, Scott Weingart here, and this is an EMCrit. My favorite part of SMACCgold was this pro-con debate on cricoid pressure, particularly the con side by John Hinds. And that's who you're going to hear from today. John gave me permission to put this on the site, and I've just been waiting for it to be published so I could put it up because it is so friggin' good. Now, before we get to John's delightful taking down of the idea of using cricoid during airway management, I should say, and you should know by now listening to the podcast, I do not support cricoid pressure, but I don't think it should be an individual decision. What I think you should do is sit down with your department and make a guideline saying, based on the preponderance of the evidence, we feel cricoid pressure is not helpful, may be harmful, and in our department we're not doing it. And then it frees you up from any potential problems as an individual because this is your departmental guideline or policy. So do that. I haven't told you how much I like SMACCgold because I'm saving you from that until it's actually possible for you to sign up for the next SMACC in 2015. But we now have the dates. And so at this point, I would tell you to put May 19th to 22nd on your calendar, 2015, and just reserve those dates from doing anything else because you want to attend SMACC. And now, you do not have to travel to Australia this year if you're in the US or the North American or South American continent. You could just come to Chicago. That's right. It's going to be in Chicago this year. And so put down the dates, May 19th to 22nd on your calendar. Show up in Chicago for what will be the best resuscitation and critical care conference ever. So there you go, May 19th to 22nd. Put it on your calendar. You can't register yet. I'll be back plugging it when you can register. And you know, I don't get any money from SMACC. I just think it's friggin' amazing. Okay, you've heard enough from me. Let's get to John Hinds on the con side of the cricoid debate.
All right, and now for the con side is Dr. John Hinds, who gave a fantastic talk just before lunch, pre-hospital anaesthetist, intensive care physician, and he'll be arguing that we should get rid of cricoid pressure. Thank you.
Excellent. Cricoid pressure. Now, many of you have been following this argument on Twitter, I'm sure much as I have, and have occasionally read something that's caused you to go completely apeshit and do this to your computer. This argument is going to be going round and round and round in circles, and to be quite honest, I don't really care if you use cricoid pressure or not, because I'm here for nefarious reasons. I'm here to sell you a drug that we've been working on in Ireland for a number of years. This is Cricolol. Cricolol is a new development in airway management. So this was my plan, get invited to an international conference with a captive audience and sell you this great new drug. Because we're quite good at appraising drugs and therapies. These are all drugs and therapies we've appraised over recent years and thrown in the bin for some of them. So Cricolol was a herbal remedy developed by an Irish guy called Seamus O'Monroe in 1774. There's Seamus. And it was rebranded by Seamus O'Selleck, a chap from Galway, in '61. He conducted an original study on 26 patients in one hospital, non-randomized, non-standardized, took a guess at the dose and gave it. And Seamus was loving this because it was then adopted into every set of guidelines throughout Ireland for difficult airway management and rapid sequence induction. He got himself a Ferrari out of it, as you can see. If you're administering Cricolol, you need a dedicated assistant. You give 10 milligrams before induction, 30 milligrams during induction. But to be quite honest, we don't know what the dose is in the syringe. To be honest, we don't know. So you just draw this stuff up and you give some. We don't know how much is in an ampule. This was a study done by Seamus O'Cozial, a guy from Cork, looking at 105 perioperative nurses giving Cricolol during the induction of anesthesia. And really nobody knew how much they were giving. Only 5% gave the right dose. Great drug. So we've been using this stuff in Ireland for half a century. We've never done a randomized control on it showing benefit, but it's fine. We do have some BSE data. If you're unfamiliar with BSE data, this is bullshit surrogate endpoint data. So we know it's good if you're dead. If you're having an MRI scan and you're a volunteer, it's quite good. And you're probably thinking at this point, well, that doesn't really sound great, but at least I hope it's safe. And there are a few problems. As one of the guys trying to sell this, I am bound to tell you about some of the problems. So it does make airway difficult more management if you administer Cricolol during your induction. You know, it causes airway compression in most patients, airway obstruction in about half. It reduces your chance of getting the tube in. There's a study by Paddy O'Levitan, who's a long-lost relative of riches. It increases your chance of vomiting and regurgitating. And it has a fairly narrow therapeutic window, so side effects include breaking the airway, and your esophagus might explode. And again, we don't know what dose you're giving in the amp. Whenever I'm doing a difficult airway, what I like to do is tie up my only expert assistant giving this drug throughout the whole course of the intubation. It's great. So Cricolol, are you interested in buying it? If I came as a drug rep, there's no evidence for it in randomized trials. We've got some BSE data. Side effects include airway collapse in most patients, complete obstruction in about half. It makes it more difficult to intubate, and it causes actual physical harm. Cricolol is also available as suppositories, by the way. Because to be perfectly honest, for all the good it does, you might as well stick it up your arse. Now, cricoid pressure, just to be serious, from one 3 pet hates of mine, I use cricoid pressure, I can just take it off if it's difficult. Well, that's what Selleck did. He put cricoid pressure on, did laryngoscopy, took it off, and resulted in the highest incidence ever reported of gastric regurgitation in any study ever done. Not a great strategy. Beware the trained assistant. This is one of our trained assistants. During a high-fidelity sim, this guy had done the airway course, knew how to put on cricoid pressure. In the heat of the moment, he's standing on the wrong side, facing backwards with his hand upside down. Probably not great cricoid pressure. Likewise, a colleague of mine asked a midwife who had been trained in the application of cricoid pressure, had done her airway crash thing, during a crash cesarean section for cricoid, and she asked him which cupboard it was kept in. Not great. This is another one. I don't believe in cricoid pressure, but I'm afraid to not use it because of the guidelines, the big scary guidelines, like the Difficult Airway Society guidelines. Well, if you actually read these things, it talks about stuff about wakening the patient up or continuing anesthesia. These are not options for us as critical care physicians. We can't wake the patient up, so these algorithms aren't relevant. What the Difficult Airway Society does say is that you should have written guidelines for each department, and any individual practitioner can make a judgment about which equipment or technique to use, and is quite entitled to do any. If you really want to protect yourself, what you should do is form institutional guidelines that exclude the use of cricoid pressure, which is what Sydney Hems have done. So if you're voting against cricoid pressure today, you think Cliff Reid is a dick, and that's quite a strong statement for you people to be coming up with. I have to follow the guidelines, though. They're written down. I have to follow them. We've heard this before on a number of occasions through history. Befal is befal. Orders are orders. This is what the Nazis used to justify their atrocities at Auschwitz. We were just following orders. Now, many of you are familiar with Goodwin's law. An online discussion, as it grows longer, the probability of comparison involving Nazis or Hitler approaches 1. Ladies and gentlemen, we have reached that time in the cricoid pressure argument. So if you vote for cricoid pressure, it leads me to one of 2 logical conclusions. Number 1, you're an idiot. Or number 2, you're a Nazi. And if anyone is interested in buying some Cricolol, we do have a trade stand available in the main area. So I shall leave you with that.